WatchCharts is the world's leading secondary watch market research platform. Dive into the data yourself at WatchCharts.com. Here at WatchCharts, we believe that value is a consideration for every watch buyer, but that depending on the reasons for the acquisition, it may rank high or low relative to other considerations. If value is very important, there are watches that offer excellent value for money when bought pre-owned instead of new, and in this video we'll talk about some of them from three different categories. If the watch is being bought to mark some special occasion, it's likelier to be brand new. If it's the 50th watch you've bought in the past 5 years, value is likely far more important to you, as you care about moving your capital from one watch to the next while losing the least amount of money, and if you're lucky, maybe even coming out ahead. If the watch in question is a grail, its price may be the final bitter pill you swallow before you experience the rapture. Our aim with these videos is to provide insights on the secondary market, to make you better informed as enthusiasts and collectors, and as buyers and sellers, and to help you understand value better. But we cannot tell you how important value should be to you relative to other concerns when buying a watch. If and when you're interested in learning more, we hope you'll come check out the data for yourself at WatchCharts.com. We'll kick things off with dress watches, cover some complications, and then look at some two-tone watches at the end. In each case, we offer watches that trade well below their current retail price, and given the option, we argue are better sought on the secondary market as opposed to paying full retail. Maybe the same is true for whichever watch or set of watches you're interested in, and hopefully this will help inspire some thinking along those lines for you. The first watch we will look at is from Vacheron Constantin. This is the Patrimony Contemporaine in rose gold with a blue dial and a manual hand-wound movement. This is a watch that retails for $22,100, but can be found on the secondary market for under $15,000, which, again, to remind you, is a 40-millimeter dress watch from a Holy Trinity brand available for that price point. And actually, of the three watches that we will talk about in the dress watch category, this would be my pick, my personal pick of the options. The value retention here is minus 34.8%, so that's about 35% below retail. The value retention is so low that I would let someone else take the depreciation hit on this watch for me. The second one is the A. Lange & Söhne Saxonia Thin, reference 201.027. This is a 37-millimeter white gold manual wound dress watch from Germany instead of Switzerland. And this retails for $23,500 and also goes for just above the $15,000 mark, giving it a value retention of minus 35.5%, so about the same as the Patrimony. And this watch experienced a recent retail price increase. That puts the retail price growth at 60% over the last 7 years, even though value retention is only just catching up to the retail price from 7 years ago. The other interesting thing about this watch, and is the general observation for all Lange watches, is that their market prices have steadily risen over the long term, if not necessarily the short term. And then lastly, the least expensive option in this particular review from Jaeger-LeCoultre is the Master Ultra Thin Date. This retails for $9,550 and can be found for $6,000 on the secondary market, which is a value retention of 30% below retail. This is automatic. It has a date window, it's in steel at 39 millimeters, and it's a great everyday dress watch. But like the other two watches, an entry point to each of the three respective brands. If you're considering buying these, they may not be your last purchase. And so the question that you really have to ask yourself is, how certain are you that you want to buy this watch in new condition and then lose 30 to 35% when you go to sell it? Or would you rather buy it at the lower price? The next set of three watches we'll look at are complication watches, and the first one is the A. Lange & Söhne Zeitwerk Date, reference 148.038. This has a retail price today of $132,000 and a market price of just over $85,000, which again is a value retention of around minus 35%. And this reference suffers from the same issue as the Lange that we looked at in the dress watch category. Because of the increase in retail prices, the secondary market price for this watch is looking a lot more attractive. And if you're curious why this watch got included on the complications view, even though it only just tells you the time and the date, technically, I will defend myself by saying that the date indication is considered a complication over just the indication of the time. But also, if you ever get the opportunity to see what the backside of one of these watches looks like, it is worth the wait because they are absolutely stunning movements. If we move from Lange back to Switzerland and look at Audemars Piguet, the Code 1159 chronograph in white gold with a blue dial is a watch that retails today for $48,200 and can be found on the secondary market for $37,000. That's about 23% below retail. And I've had the pleasure of handling one of these white gold chronographs, not with the blue dial, but with a burgundy dial. And everything about the watch screams luxury in every aspect of the owning experience. The way you interact with the pushers for the chronograph, the crown feel, the case construction, all of the various finishes on the surfaces, the way the lugs sit against the case. It's not as simplistic a watch as it may first appear in images. And of course, it's got a beautiful chronograph movement and a chronograph indication, therefore being included in this particular view. And so the last watch comes not just from one of the watch world's most revered brands, but also happens to be the complication that is considered to be the most desirable among all complications. The perpetual calendar from Patek Philippe, reference 5327G. This retails for $102,900 and goes on the secondary market for just shy of $70,000, which means it's trading about 32% below retail. And so in a trivial sense, this watch is the answer to the question, do all Pateks trade above retail? Well, clearly they don't. But also that if you're thinking about spending about this much money on a perpetual calendar, then it's not just the usual suspects that you may think about from the primary market that would be part of your shortlist. There are options on the secondary market that do provide compelling value, perhaps even from more prestigious brands than you would otherwise expect at that price point on the primary market. And then the last category, the two-tone watches, is one that I am personally very preferential to, and I think is a category that certainly in terms of its market performance suffers a little bit from its association with perhaps being the least attractive of the three precious metal, non-precious metal, and mixed precious and non-precious metal options for watches. Once again, for my personal taste, I think one of the watches that best epitomizes really this category, certainly from an aesthetic standpoint, if not also from a market standpoint, is the Cartier Santos Medium in steel and yellow gold. This retails for $10,300. Its current market price is around $8,600, meaning it trades at about 16% discount on its retail value. And the thing about this watch is, again, that when you see it in person, if you have any sort of appreciation whatsoever for two-tone, the balance of gold to steel on this watch, especially once it's on the wrist, is just incredibly well balanced and makes for a very pleasant wearing experience. But again, if it is going to be your 50th watch in 5 years, then do you really want to buy this at retail? Maybe you do with this watch in particular, because it does have a polished bezel that is a scratch magnet. You as much as look at it and it ends up picking up hairline scratches. So if that's something that really bothers you, then maybe you would. But if you know going in that this is something you're not going to have to hold for the long term in your collection and just want to experience for some defined amount of time, however long or short that may be, then maybe buying it on the secondary market makes more sense. This watch is a twofer because it is not only a two-tone watch, but also happens to be the Globemaster, one of the most overlooked watches within Omega's catalog. These watches have pipe hand dials that harken back to the original Constellation designs from the 50s and 60s, and they keep that sort of design tradition alive. But in this instance, you get a steel and gold bracelet, a gold bezel on a steel case, and steel accented hands and hour markers with a date window at 6 o'clock. This retails for $13,200 and goes on the secondary market for less than the Cartier at $8,100. That's almost 40% below retail for this Globemaster. And I think the two things that explain why the retail price for this watch is higher than the Cartier is, one, just the use of what is visibly and evidently a lot more gold. And so the material cost is likely higher. And then, of course, it has a META-certified coaxial escapement movement, which is also going to be technically superior to the movement in the Cartier. And so in that sense, between these two watches, the Omega, even though it starts out at a higher retail price, ending up at a lower market price means it's a relatively better value between these two watches. And then further down the price ladder is the Tudor Black Base Steel and Gold, reference 79733. This is at 41 millimeters in steel and gold, where the implementation is the most frugal of the three watches in terms of the amount of gold used, because the crown, which appears gold, is steel plated with gold. The bezel is similarly gold plated. The first end link for the bracelet at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock that sits next to the case is made of solid gold, and then every subsequent link in the bracelet is capped gold. So it's a steel link with a gold plating on top. This retails for $5,700, and that price really starts to make sense once you understand relative to the other watches, how little gold is being used here, and goes on the secondary market for $3,300. That's over 40% below retail. And the thing about this watch, again, is because it's a particular and distinct look and sits within the Black Bay family, I think there's a very particular type of customer that might be interested in wanting to buy and own this watch for a period of time. And then once that sort of experience is done and over with, moving out of the watch. And so, again, if this watch is going to lose over 2/5 of its value on the secondary market, if you buy it at retail and then decide you want to sell it, you really have to ask yourself whether it's not just worth buying used and not new. We hope you found this video interesting, and this approach to talking about watches that are more approached from a value-driven standpoint than other considerations was interesting as well. Let us know in the comments what other market insights you'd like to see us feature next. Thanks for listening.